The limousine's interior was a velvet cocoon, its dim amber lighting casting long, treacherous shadows across Sophia's face. Her breath hitched as Julian's gaze burned into her, a smoldering fire that seemed to consume the oxygen between them. The low, steady hum of the engine was no match for the thundering of her heart, each beat a warning she was too far gone to heed. She sat across from him, the sheer black robe she wore doing little to hide the crimson lingerie beneath, a choice Julian had made, his fingers lingering on the lace just hours ago. His presence was a live wire, electrifying the air, pulling her toward a precipice she'd sworn never to approach. "We shouldn't be here," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling, not from fear, but from the raw, primal desire clawing at her chest. The words were a fragile dam against a flood she could no longer contain. Julian leaned closer, his fingers brushing hers, a touch so soft it was almost cruel in its intensity. "Sophia," he murmured, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "We left, shouldn't, behind the moment we stepped into this car." Her mind screamed at her to pull back, to slam the brakes on this reckless spiral. But his eyes, deep, green, and unrelenting, held her captive, stripping away every defense she'd built over years of calculated control. The city lights streaked past the tinted windows, a kaleidoscope of neon and steel. But inside, the world had shrunk to the space between them. They were two souls, teetering on the edge of a forbidden dance, each step a descent into a darkness that promised both ruin and rapture. Sophia's breath came in shallow gasps, her fingers tightening around the stem of her champagne flute, the bubbles long gone flat. She tried to anchor herself in the familiar, her role as stepmom, the boundaries that had kept them safe. But Julian's gaze was a tidal wave, washing away reason, leaving only the truth of what they both wanted. "Julian," she started, her voice barely a whisper, "this could destroy us." He didn't flinch. Instead, he closed the distance, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. "Maybe," he said, his voice steady, "but I'd rather burn with you than live without this." Before she could protest, his lips crashed into hers, a kiss that was equal parts desperation and defiance. It was fire and fury, a collision of everything they'd buried for years, longing, guilt, and a hunger that refused to be tamed. Sophia melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer as if she could fuse their bodies to erase the lines that divided them. The limo glided through Manhattan's glittering streets, but inside, time was meaningless. The kiss deepened, a vow sealed in the heat of their shared breath, a promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together. When the car slowed, the glow of streetlights seeping through the windows, Sophia pulled back, her lips tingling, her heart a wild drum. She'd crossed the line, and there was no going back. But as Julian's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with a quiet certainty, she realized she didn't want to. Hours earlier, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Manhattan skyline in hues of gold and crimson, Sophia stood in the heart of her walk-in closet, a shrine to her meticulously crafted life. Floor-to-ceiling racks held designer gowns, each one a testament to her rise from a scrappy dreamer to a powerhouse who commanded every room she entered. The air was thick with the scent of Chanel No. 5 and the quiet rustle of silk, each garment a story of triumph, ambition, and the art of being seen. But tonight, that armor felt heavy, inadequate for the uncertainty ahead. She had a date, arranged through a high-end dating app that promised discretion and exclusivity, catering to New York's elite who craved connection without complications. The thought of meeting someone new, someone who might see past her polished exterior to the woman beneath, sent a shiver of excitement through her. But as she sifted through her wardrobe, her fingers trailing over satin and lace, doubt crept in. The dresses, vibrant and varied, seemed to mock her indecision, their elegance no match for the chaos in her mind. Sophia, the woman who always had an answer, was lost. The sharp creak of the closet door jolted her from her thoughts. She spun around, her pulse spiking as Julian stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his green eyes wide with surprise as they took in the intimate scene. Sophia in a silk slip, surrounded by a sea of lingerie. "Shit, Mom, I didn't know you were in here," he stammered, a flush creeping up his neck, his usual confidence faltering. Sophia forced a smile, her composure snapping back like a well-rehearsed script. "It's okay, Julian. What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice steady despite the sudden heat in her cheeks. He shifted, his gaze flickering to the array of bras and panties on display before darting away, like he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to. "I just needed to talk about something. College stuff. But it can wait if you're in the middle of something," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. She studied him, her maternal instincts clashing with a new, unsettling awareness. Julian wasn't the lanky kid who used to sneak extra cookies from the kitchen anymore. At 22, he was a man. Tall, athletic, with a quiet intensity that made her stomach flip in ways it shouldn't. "Don't go," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Maybe you can help me pick something for tonight. I'm kind of stuck." Julian's eyebrows shot up, surprise giving way to curiosity. "Yeah? Sure, I can do that," he said, stepping into the closet like he was crossing a forbidden threshold. The air shifted, heavy with unspoken tension, as they began a delicate dance of selection. Sophia tried on dresses, a sapphire gown that hugged her curves, a black number with a plunging neckline, each one drawing thoughtful comments from Julian. His insights were sharp, his compliments genuine, and with every outfit, the distance between them shrank, the stepmom-stepson label fraying at the edges. When Sophia stepped into the crimson lingerie set, a daring choice Julian had pointed to with a hesitant grin, the room seemed to pulse with a new energy. The lace bra and matching thong were a masterpiece, accentuating every curve, while the sheer black robe added a layer of mystery, like a secret waiting to be unveiled. She turned to face him, her breath catching at the raw hunger in his eyes. It wasn't just admiration, it was desire, pure and unfiltered, the kind of look that could set a room on fire. "You look unreal," Julian said, his voice rough, like he was fighting to keep it together. Sophia's smile was shaky, her heart a wild rhythm in her chest. "Thanks, Julian. You've got a good eye," she said, trying to keep it light, but the words felt inadequate against the weight of his gaze. She stepped out of the closet, the robe billowing behind her like a dark veil. As she left the penthouse, the soft click of the door was a drumbeat, marking the start of a night that would change everything. Manhattan at night was a living, breathing beast, neon signs flickering, horns blaring, the pulse of a city that never slept. But inside the restaurant, a chic hideaway on the Upper East Side, the world slowed to a sultry hum. Low lighting bathed the room in a golden glow, the soft strains of a jazz quartet weaving through the murmur of conversation. The maitre d' led Sophia to a corner table, tucked away for privacy, perfect for the kind of night she'd been promised by the app, a night of mystery, of possibility. She ordered a glass of Napa Valley Cabernet, the rich, velvety flavor grounding her as she waited. Her thoughts kept drifting to the closet, to Julian's gaze, to the way he'd seen her, not as the woman who'd married his dad, but as someone vibrant, alive, desirable. She shook her head, trying to focus on the stranger she was about to meet. The app had matched her with someone refined, someone who could keep up with her world. But as the minutes ticked by, her nerves started to fray, a rare crack in her usual poise. Then the door swung open, and her world tilted on its axis. Julian strode in, his tailored black suit hugging his frame, his smile a mix of confidence and mischief. "Julian?" she gasped, her voice a mix of shock and disbelief, the wineglass trembling in her hand. "Hey, Sophia," he said, sliding into the seat across from her, like he belonged there. "Hope you're not too mad about the surprise." Mad didn't begin to cover it. Her heart was a jackhammer, her mind racing to make sense of the impossible. Julian, the guy who'd stood in her closet, who'd picked out the lingerie, now pressing against her skin, was here, on her date, looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered. "What the hell are you doing, Julian?" she demanded, her voice low, sharp, barely containing the storm inside her. He leaned in, his eyes locked on hers, unflinching. I couldn't let this slip away, Sophia. I've been thinking about you, really thinking about you, for longer than I want to admit. I want this. I want us, not as family, but as something more. His words were a punch to the gut, raw and honest, tearing through every wall she'd built. She knew she should get up, walk out, end this insanity before it consumed them both. But the sincerity in his voice, the way his gaze held hers like a lifeline, kept her rooted to the spot. She took a slow sip of wine, the liquid burning down her throat, and nodded. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's give this night a shot. Dinner was a slow unraveling, each course a chapter in a story neither had expected to write. Julian opened up about his struggles, his dad's suffocating expectations, his fear of becoming just another cog in the family empire, his quiet dream of building something of his own. Sophia, usually so guarded, found herself sharing pieces of her past, her early days hustling in a cutthroat industry, the heartbreak that had taught her to trust no one, the hope she still carried, buried deep, for a connection that felt real. They laughed over shared memories, Julian's teenage antics, Sophia's attempts to play the cool stepmom, and with each story, the years of distance melted away. The stepmom-stepson dynamic that had defined them for so long was replaced by something raw, electric, undeniable. When Julian recounted a disastrous attempt at surfing during a family vacation, Sophia's laugh was loud, unfiltered, the kind she hadn't let out in years. And when their eyes met across the table, she realized she wasn't just enjoying the night, she was falling, hard. As the waiter cleared their dessert plates, Julian reached for her hand, his touch warm, steady, a silent vow. Sophia, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I know this is messed up. I know it breaks every rule. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. I want you. Tonight. Tomorrow. For as long as you'll have me. His confession was a spark in a tinderbox, igniting something she couldn't extinguish. Sophia's breath caught, her mind screaming at her to pull back, to protect them both from the fallout. But her heart had other plans. She squeezed his hand, her fingers trembling but sure. I don't know what this means, Julian, she said, her voice raw, but I'm not ready to walk away from it. A sleek black limo idled outside, its polished surface reflecting the city's glow like a dark mirror. Julian opened the door, his grin playful but edged with intent. Night's not over yet, Sophia, he said, his voice a low promise that sent a shiver down her spine. Inside, the limo was a world apart, plush leather seats, soft amber lighting, the faint scent of cedar and wealth. Julian poured champagne, the bubbles catching the light as he handed her a glass. To taking chances, he toasted, his glass clinking against hers, the sound a quiet vow. Sophia smiled, her heart racing as she sipped, the crisp taste mingling with the heat of the moment. As the limo wove through the city, they talked about old movies they loved, summers spent at the Hamptons, dreams they'd never dared voice. But beneath the easy banter was a current of desire, growing stronger with every glance, every brush of their hands. Julian's fingers found hers, his thumb tracing slow, deliberate circles on her skin, each touch a spark that threatened to ignite. Sophia, he said, his voice a low plea. I've wanted this, wanted you, for so damn long. Before she could respond, he leaned in, his lips capturing hers, in a kiss that was both a question and a claim. It was fire, passion, a shattering of every boundary they'd ever known. Sophia kissed him back, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer as the world outside dissolved into a blur of light and sound. The lingerie Julian had chosen was a secret between them, the silk and lace a reminder of how close they'd already come. His hands roamed her body, reverent, exploring every curve with a hunger that matched her own. She responded in kind, her breath hitching as they lost themselves in each other. The limo a sanctuary where rules didn't exist. When the car pulled into the building's garage, the shift from the city's chaos to the quiet was jarring. They stepped out, hands still linked, and rode the elevator in silence, the air thick with anticipation. When they entered the penthouse, the familiar space, sleek furniture, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows, felt charged, transformed by the weight of what they'd done. In the living room, the city skyline glittered like a constellation, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Julian poured 2 glasses of bourbon, the amber liquid glinting as he handed one to Sophia. "We don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice steady, resolute. "This is ours, Sophia. No one else gets to decide what it means." She nodded, his certainty easing the knot of fear in her chest. They started to dance, the soft jazz from the surround sound guiding their movements. Their bodies moved as one, each step a confession, each touch a promise. Sophia's hands rested on his shoulders, feeling the strength beneath his shirt, while his hands settled on her waist, warm and sure. When the song ended, they stood still, their breaths mingling, eyes locked in a silent pact. The next kiss was a vow, a commitment to face the consequences together. Clothes fell away, his shirt, her robe, the crimson lingerie, each piece a barrier shed, revealing the truth beneath. On the couch, they came together, their bodies a symphony of passion and surrender. Every touch, every kiss was a pledge, a promise that they were all in, no matter the cost. When the wave of pleasure crashed over them, it was a moment of transcendence, a connection that burned brighter than the city outside. They lay entwined, their breaths slowing, the bourbon forgotten on the coffee table. "This is real, isn't it?" Sophia whispered, her voice soft against the quiet hum of the penthouse. Julian's arms tightened around her, his lips brushing her forehead. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's the realest thing I've ever felt." As dawn's first light crept through the windows, Sophia woke in Julian's arms, their bodies still warm from the night's fire. The city was stirring below, a reminder of the world they'd have to face. Reality loomed like a storm cloud, but in that moment, it felt distant, unimportant. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Julian asked, his voice quiet but firm, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. Sophia nodded, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "It does," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the truth. "But we'll figure it out. Together." They talked, their voices low, weaving a fragile bridge to the future. They spoke of the risks, the family drama, the whispers that would follow, the judgment they couldn't escape. But they also spoke of hope, of the possibility that what they'd found was worth fighting for. Julian's hand found hers, his grip strong, grounding. "I don't care what anyone says," he said, his eyes fierce. "I'm not letting this go. I'm not letting you go." Sophia smiled, a quiet strength settling in her chest. "Neither am I," she said, the words a vow as binding as any ring. As they rose, the city waking outside, Sophia felt the weight of the unknown, but looking into Julian's eyes, she saw not just the man who'd upended her world, but the partner she'd choose to face it with. The penthouse, once a stage for their separate lives, was now a sanctuary, a place where they'd rewritten their story. Whatever lay ahead, scandal, heartbreak, or something brighter, they'd meet it head on, hand in hand, bound by a love that refused to be tamed.